record our excited. I think the last 3 times we've tried to do it, we have had nothing but problems. Zoom wouldn't want to connect with Facebook. Facebook wouldn't want to work with Zoom. Anyway, welcome, Dr. McDermott of Durango Animal Hospital, 4E Kennels trusted vet with all of our moms, our pregnancy concerns, our puppies, our clients. So many of our clients use you. You are kind of, ready or not, willing or not, you're kind of the doodle doc around here.
It's a title I'm happy to have.
How many doodles do you see a day?
Oh my God, so many. I mean, it's funny when we have like vet students that come out and visit us and spend time here. They're like, "Do you see other things besides doodles?" I mean, but it's not a. If I had to pick a breed to work with a lot, it's definitely one I would pick. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. What do you like most about them?
They just have a great personality. They're pretty easygoing most of the time, and obviously a lot of the ones that come from you tend to be very, very easy to work with. So, you know, it's some of the other breeds I love them to death, but they're kind of squirrely when they come to see us, and so it's nice that we have some that are not completely opposed to being here. Most of them don't even mind.
Like, touch me wherever, however. Sounds like my dogs. Well, tell us, I am super excited about something you're working on in an effort to help your clients and help our dogs. Tell us about it. Yeah,
so I've talked with some of your listeners or followers a little bit about it, but so I'm in the process of designing and developing the home vet bag. It's going to be a more or less a first aid kit for pets at home for owners. But what it's going to be is what I would have, or what I do have in my vet bag as I go out and do house calls and that kind of thing. It has all the main stuff I need to treat pretty much anything that can't be treated or that can be treated outside of the hospital. And that's the goal. I mean, it's not going to replace seeing a vet, but it might make it to where there's some visits you can avoid, something that's minor or something that can wait through the night, and make it to where you're not going to an emergency clinic. Like I said, you know, there may be minor things we can do that we could address on the spot, and, you know, not only just avoiding that, but also, you know, making it easing discomfort for our pets and making things better. So I realized probably, I started working on this about 6 months ago. I noticed that I had a client that asked me what they should have at home for pets, and I looked around, and all the commercially available bags, they were just human vet first aid kits that had a picture of Paul on them. And so I realized that, you know, there wasn't something out there that I thought was really good that was affordable, because there are some out there that are, you know, $100, $150, $200 that would have what someone would need at home. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, good. And some of the differences, we've talked fairly extensively about this too. Some of the differences in your bag and what you can just buy on Amazon. The thing is, the trouble with marketing, or the how clever people are, they say 50 pieces included, and they're literally, like the example you said, on a bag, there's like 10 safety pins in the bag, which counts as 10 pieces in your vet bag. That is not the case for you. You are truly offering a product that nobody else is doing. They're doing it, but not well. You're putting things in there that really does make a difference and just doesn't look nice, and it's just not cheap to put in there. Really making the effort, taking the effort and time to build something that we all really need to have if we have a dog, and that's what it comes down to. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the bags, it's just, most of the stuff in there is just fillers, just so they can say they have a certain number of items in there, and that's not what I'm about. I've been working 6 months on the supplies. I have zero idea how many items are in there. I'm not going for a certain number as far as, you know, this many pieces. I don't know. I mean, it's focused more on functionality. You know, what do we need? What can help us? You know, everything in there is some sort of usable item that you will likely use by owning a pet. And so, like I said, it's, I don't know. I'm very proud of it. I'm excited about it. You know, hopefully we'll get things rolling here soon. I can't see as well on my screen what's going on, but just to kind of show your viewers. So this is our initial mock-up of the bag. And it's, you know, decent size, but it's not too big. And then it's lined with pockets on the inside for all the items that'll be in there. You know, we're finalizing the supplies. So once we get all that going, it's just a matter of getting her out there. So I'm keep an eye out, everybody, for it, and we're excited about it.
Okay, good. We have lots of people tuning in. Good morning to everybody. I'm going to get to your questions and comments, but first of all, lots of people are saying good morning. And this is interesting. One of my breeder mentors asked if there's a link to buy one. Are you willing or ready to share kind of an idea we had yesterday about helping breeders?
Yeah, so I don't have a link yet, but hopefully once we get everything together, it's going to be here within the next couple of months is my goal. That we'll have it out there selling. But yeah, I mean, we've looked at different options. I mean, I want to try to provide it for as many people as possible. So we've looked at the possibility for having a discounted price for, vet clinics so that they can sell it in their lobby, for breeders, for sitting home with puppies and, something to help them stand apart from, the other breeder down the street that's, just selling puppies out of their backyard, lend that legitimacy to, hey, I've got this, not just a pet for you, but also here's how you take care of it as well. And along with everything else that they're doing to show that they're going above and beyond the average breeder. So yeah, we're definitely looking at all that stuff, and I'm going to be releasing all that stuff, hopefully within the next couple of months is the goal as far as like links for sale and stuff.
Yeah, and Rachel, don't worry, I'll be letting, when Dr. McDermott finalizes the breeder plan and program for us, I'll be getting you guys all of that information. I'm super excited. This is definitely a really amazing thing we can add to our go home bag to send home with our puppies with the go home vet bag, a way in which clients can ensure that their dogs are well taken care of in ways that we just haven't had before. We run to our own medicine cabinet and try to put things together. We're trying to Google really fast. To be able to just look through it, know what you have. You're gonna have instructions how to use everything. You're gonna have QR codes on it, correct? That we could scan it and have information right away?
Yeah, so the first aid manual is gonna have QR code on it that will link you directly to the, the website where it's gonna have video. A lot of it's a digital age, so, not many people want to take the time to read a manual anymore, but
No.
It'll link you directly to the website where there'll be videos.
My dog eats gum with xylitol. I can scan the damn manual super fast, and you can be right there right now telling me what to do as far as how to induce vomiting, should I induce vomiting, things like that. So anyway, super exciting with this product coming up and everything you're going to be offering in your Go Home Vet Bag. Do you want to say good morning to everybody?
Good morning.
She's late to the show because she's been out feeding her farm animals. She has quite the schedule every morning. She feeds, why don't you tell us real quick, and then we'll start with your questions. Where do you start?
Chickens,
feed the chickens.
the deer, the dogs, all over.
Her horse. She goes and does the whole, she has her whole little path and schedule of feeding and watering and checking on all the farm animals and her cats and her dogs. Did you feed my dogs this morning?
No.
No, I'll have to feed my dogs.
That's your responsibility.
That's my responsibility.
Your dogs.
Thank God they tell me when I forget. Good grief. All right, we're going to jump into questions. Lisa wants to know, what is the best age to spay? But why don't you tackle both spay and neuter?
Yeah, so honestly, right now, there's a pretty big debate even in the veterinary community. I actually was reading an article yesterday that was talking about it. But so, there's different schools of thought. So the older mentality from, decades ago was, especially with a spay, we let them go through one heat cycle and then you spay them afterwards. Okay. So as far as hormones are related, science has shown that if we spay them before their first heat cycle, we decrease their chance of mammary cancer significantly. So after one heat cycle, they'll go into 7% of them will get mammary cancer, and after two, about 25% of them will. Now, with neuters, the longer they have them, the longer they're going to have the greater chance they have of testicular cancer. But when we neuter them, we take those off, so it's not as much of an issue. So, then I think it was about 2003, there was a study that was done at UC Davis, and it showed that some of these dogs that are large breed dogs, so it applies only to large breed dogs, that were neutered or spayed too early we saw some changes in arthritis and issues with the bones as they start to get older. They were at a higher propensity for arthritis and issues with lameness. And so it's kind of a constantly changing thing, but you know, there's some vets that, and some people that will recommend waiting until they're closer to, you know, a year. We definitely have pretty much all pushed away from our large breed dogs, pushing away from spaying them at 4 months or under, which is what actually is required by law in Clark County. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I usually do 6-7 months. But if we go longer, I don't have a problem. You just have to realize that the older that they get, you know, that we increase that mammary cancer chance. We also increase the possibility of having, you know, any kind of hormone-related behaviors that are undesirable. So I would say, like I said, older than 6 months, probably less than a year would be my recommendation, somewhere in there. And like I said, the neuters, they can wait a little bit longer. I'm not as worried about them. But the other thing with our large breed dogs is we also have to realize, especially with neuters, the bigger they get, the higher the complication rate from being too active. So it's a bunch of different factors, but like I said, I kind of hone in that 6 to 8 month kind of time period.
Yeah. And, you know, I get asked this question all the time too. And you and I have talked about this. And, you know, I also tell people there's always pros and cons to everything, but I would never willingly let my female have a heat cycle. It's generally 3 weeks long. They increases their chances of pyometra, which is an infection of the uterus. They can be moody. They are hussies. They will climb fences they've never climbed. They will escape like they've never tried. Boys will come from a mile away. I mean, you're just setting yourself up for 3 weeks of some difficulties in managing a female in heat. God love my guardian homes that deal with that. Thank you all very much for putting up with my girls in heat. All right, next question. Let me find one. Please too, while we take this small break, ask your vet-related questions. Let's see here. I'm waiting for more questions to come in. What do you, I'm going to ask you, because this is a common question we get, about vaccines for puppies. When are they fully vaccinated? What vaccines do they need?
Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit of a loaded question because it depends on where they're at as far as what they need. You know, our general goal is we want to give them as few vaccines as possible. You know, we want to give them what they need, but we don't want to give them more than what they need. So, you know, most places in the country, you know, the core set of vaccines are going to include distemper and parvo. And when we say distemper, it's got about 4 or 5 different viral things in there. Bordetella, which is kennel cough, which also has a few different respiratory things in it, and then rabies. Okay, so in some parts of the country, they have ticks. They need Lyme vaccine. Some places, if you go hiking, you might need a leptospirosis vaccine. So a lot of it's, you know, kind of leaning on your veterinarian as far as what's common in your area. But those 4 are pretty common across the country. So we normally start vaccinating at around 7 or 8 weeks of age. And then we vaccinate about 4 weeks apart after that. So we do, our ideal situation, we do at least 3 vaccines. So 1 at 8, 1 at 12, and 1 at 16 weeks, or, you know, within a week or so of that. You know, we have people come in all the time and they have shots from somewhere that they got a dog. And, you know, it's like the vaccines were given every 2 weeks. Vaccines don't work like that. They work in a very specific way as far as how they stimulate the immune system. And when we give those booster shots in that series, it gives us enough immunity to prevent any kind of infection. So pretty much they're not going to be fully vaccinated until they get that last set of shots when they're about 16 weeks. That being said, we also have to temper that with the socialization aspect. And we want to definitely avoid places like dog parks or Petco or PetSmart with them when they're not fully vaccinated. But if we have a friend that has a dog that doesn't go to the dog park that's fully vaccinated, absolutely, I let them hang out with those dogs because we want to socialize them. We want them around other people. We just want to do it safely. And like I said, you know, the big thing is leaning on your veterinarian as far as what's in your area and making sure you're covering everything. You know, I don't know. Sometimes we get, you know, people who come in and they're concerned about like, oh, we're just kind of like running up this or doing this. And I can tell you, pretty much every veterinarian I've ever met, like our goal is not to run up a bill on someone or do something that's unnecessary. You know, we're pretty much making recommendations from the heart for what we think is best. and what we think is best for your pet. And, you know, realize that it's always a recommendation. You can always do what you think you want to do or what you feel comfortable with, but know that our recommendations come from science and experience, and they're not necessarily, you know, we're not trying to just make a buck. It's
and
really
what you see in the area. I think that is so important. Your vet's going to know. You know, I sell my dogs nationally, and people say, well, what flea and tick medication do you use? I'm the worst one to ask because we don't use it because we don't have that issue in our area. So again, leaning upon your vet, they know what they're seeing in the area. K-flu is another one too that seems to be something for them to consider. But especially if you are traveling with your dog, you're hiking with your dog, they're in lakes and rivers and around ticks and mosquitoes, you know, talk to your vet and let them know the lifestyle of your dog.
Yeah, and I always encourage people, you know, and I hope that people do this with me, and I feel like my clients do, but, you know, look at your veterinarian as more than just, you know, the mechanic that you're bringing your car to. You know, we today our pets are part of the family, so realize that they're one of your family doctors, and so communicate with them. If your situation changes, hey, I'm going to be traveling more, or hey, I got a new dog, or hey, I'm going to get a cat, or some sort of other unusual animal, or, you know, if something's going to change in the environment, talk to your vet about it so they can help you modify the plan, because it's not always one size fits all kind of situation. We try to tailor it to the individual, and it takes communication as far as like what's going on. If you're going to start hiking, that's awesome, but let's talk about, you know, Lyme vaccine or leptospirosis or flea and tick prevention, depending on where you're at. And so, because prevention is always going to be much better for the pet and way cheaper for you than it is to treat. So.
Good. Thank you. All right. Another question from Natasha. She says, good morning. My dog is 16 months old and has had 3 seizures during the past 6 weeks. What are possible causes of this?
Yeah, so 16 months. So seizures are difficult. Okay. So the reason being is that we don't have number one, we don't have the ability to differentiate different types of seizures as much as they do in people. So in people, a seizure could constitute just staring off into space for a while. Dogs may have this, we don't know. Generally, the only seizures that we know that dogs have are the full grand mal seizures where they're chomping at the teeth, they fall over, they're unaware of what's going on around them. They may lose bowel and bladder, and then after it stops, they're usually kind of out of it for a few minutes. It's kind of like resetting the computer the wrong way. And so that's the ones that we see, but we don't really know if they're having other ones, so that's a tough part. But the major thing that we see as far as seizures is going to be things that are going to show up on blood work. So maybe there's a liver problem the liver's not working as well as it should, or there's a blood sugar problem, something like that is causing a seizure. Or we have this other category of stuff called epilepsy. So epilepsy is just, it's a seizure and we usually don't know the reason why. It's something in the brain that's just firing wrong. Generally epilepsy shows up a little bit later, but I have seen some close to that age. It's managed with medication if they're having a lot of them, which the way you describe it, we're getting pretty close to that. But usually the initial step that we do is we do some blood work first to rule out anything that's fixable as far as, you know, abnormalities. And if that's normal, then it's going to be something in the brain, and we manage it as far as, you know, medication, depending on how frequent they're having it.
Okay. All right, good. So maybe see her vet and do some of that follow-up blood work.
Yep.
Lisa's asking, is there a home remedy for ear infections for dogs prone to when they swim, prone to dogs that swim a lot?
So it's a good question. So I don't know as much of a remedy, but as far as prevention is the key with these guys. So having a general ear cleaner that has an alcohol base to it, you know, you think about your kids going swimming and swimmer's ear in their ear. Same kind of principle. If the dog goes swimming a lot, you know, put the ear cleaner in the ear afterwards, and it'll allow the ear to dry out. So every bacteria and yeast, their 3 favorite things are going to be an area that are warm, dark, and moist. And so the ears are already warm and dark. You add moisture in there and it's a party. So preventing that moisture from being in there is the goal. So we can't, most of these dogs, we're not going to prevent them from jumping in the pool, but if we can dry the ears out afterwards with a good ear cleaner, that's going to help. And then if they're prone to ear infections, once or twice a week on a routine basis, just clean the ears out. And, we don't ever want to stick anything down in the ears. Just put the ear cleaner in there. We all make it too complicated. Just stick the ear cleaner in there and let it evaporate out. That's how it's designed. And that's what's going to kill stuff. So that's my general recommendation.
For our poodles and doodles, you recommend plucking the hair out of the ears to make cleaning more efficient. You're able to keep the bacteria cleaner because you can wipe the skin without it getting trapped in the hair, correct?
Correct. So there is normal function to hair in places that it grows, as far as, like the ears, for example. But when it gets excessive, which it tends to in these breeds, it can cause more issues. It's basically like a net that catches all the stuff that gets trapped in there. So absolutely recommend that. And then, for many, many years, I've always told people, and this is what the way I understood it is that, if you get moisture in the ears, that's what contributes to the ear infections. But some of the dermatologists are coming out now and saying that doesn't happen unless they have an underlying allergy. That you can put a dog in water every single day that doesn't have allergies, they're not going to develop an ear infection. But if they're developing an allergy or their ear infections when they get wet, they probably have some sort of underlying allergy. So it's something that's worth addressing as well. If that can get addressed, then that might help prevention as well.
Okay, good key. If you're dealing with chronic ear infections, check for an allergy. Generally, it could be environmental or food.
Correct.
Okay, all right, awesome, good. Another question from Jenny. She says, good morning. My 3-year-old German Shepherd has lost weight and isn't eating as much as he used to. Blood work is normal, it's not worms. Any guesses on what this could be? Because from here, it's just thousands and thousands of dollars of scans and tests to try to figure out what we really don't have.
Yeah, so it's a complicated question because it depends on what blood work they've done. There's different things that we worry about. So, once again, I go back to people and I get it. So we have been very blessed in the way of we have more and more diagnostics that are available to us to help us find out what's going on. But associated with those more diagnostics are more costs. So, it's a constant struggle that we have with trying to figure stuff out. Our general goal is to figure out is what's going on with spending the least amount of money for someone. And so, but sometimes it's a process. I always joke with clients that, your dog is should probably be on House, the show. There's always going to be cases that are more complicated in nature that require more of a workup. So, if initial blood work was normal, generally what we do is do like an X-ray or an ultrasound and look to see if there's anything wrong structurally in the bowel and the intestines. German Shepherds are prone to some absorption issues and issues with the pancreas, but of course that requires special testing and blood testing. So it's hard. I get it. It's one of those things where sometimes we get to a point where it's like, well, we're either going to have to do more testing to figure out what's causing this, or we try to manage it as far as watching calories, watching at home, seeing how we're doing. Trying to bump up the calories a little bit, trying to make the food more digestible, and focus on those things. But realize that, if we had a crystal ball that would tell us exactly what it was, we would love to have that. But, sometimes it's just, the only option is more testing to figure out what's going on. And identifying some of these problems is a lot of times the key as far as getting it under control. But like I said, I would think of it with the breed and the age that what you're listing. Like I said, maybe some absorption issues, or some issues with the pancreas and not working as well as it should, as far as breaking down fats and things, would be kind of where I would jump to next. And there are some tests for that, that can be done. But that would be my next thing.
Yeah, and CBC, like a normal blood work, wouldn't pick up on pancreatic problems like that then?
Correct. So it's going to show you a pancreas value, but it's not going to show you. So there's something called Exocrine Pancreatic Insufficiency. We call it EPI for short because we have lots of long names for stuff. But basically, it's a condition where there's just the pancreas. It has two functions. One is that it's going to control insulin for regulating the sugars, like as in diabetes. But it also secretes enzymes that help with breaking down fat when it's eaten. And so these guys can have some issues with that, where their pancreas is not secreting that, so their fat doesn't get digested, and they get weight loss issues, sometimes have little diarrhea issues. And we actually supplement them with pancreatic enzymes. It's actually ground up beef pancreas, that can help. But you know, it's one of those things where you kind of have to identify that, and there's a special blood test that checks for those conditions. So yeah, like I said, it just might be needing to dive in a little bit deeper. Otherwise, modified diet, highly digestible food would be kind of where I'd go next.
Yeah, sounds like it's just trying to solve the problem one step at a time. All right, Morgan's asking, we already covered this question, Morgan, so I'll just refer you to the beginning of the video, though. She asked what age is best to spay or neuter. So we did cover that. So when we're done with the live, go back. That was one of the first things we covered. We have a question from Andrea, just hopped on, so not sure what was talked about. This has not been talked about. What are your feelings on raw food?
Yeah, so most veterinarians that you talk to, we're not going to be huge fans of raw diet, okay? But there's a reason behind that. So if you ask me, can the raw diet be done correctly and done well? I would say yes, okay? But majority of people are not willing to do the work. It's very labor intensive, and it's very time intensive, and it's very money intensive. So to do it correctly, it takes a lot of commitment. Okay? And the average person is not willing to commit to those things. And so it's one of these things where that if you don't do it 100% correctly, it can be detrimental. So it can be detrimental to the pet. We can have infectious issues. So basically, realize if you have kids in the house and you're feeding your dog a raw diet, every time that your dog goes and licks their face, it's spreading salmonella or E. coli to their face. So, you know, these are factors that have to be worked into it. So I've known dogs that have been on a raw diet and done very, very well, but it has to be done very specifically, very well. And there has to be appropriate supplements to make sure that we're covering everything that they're not getting. So generally, we're going to play to the law of averages, and the average person is not going to do it correctly. There's going to be something missing. So we will generally recommend a commercial diet to make sure that we're hedging our bets, that we have the greatest chance of getting them what they need.
Okay, good, thank you. There is options to, it's pricey, but you can order the raw food, have it shipped in frozen. But again, you're counting on that company to process it correctly. Has it been frozen the entire time shipping? You know, I've had it delivered to my door, not frozen, so that you're refreezing it and you wonder, well, how long has it not been frozen? So there are a lot of concerns with raw. Like you said, if done well, great. It's not an easy thing to do. I think as a whole, you look at the way we're feeding ourselves and our children, and that's a huge indicator that we definitely should not be or may not be able to make that commitment of spending all the time to buy fresh, prep, make sure all the values, like you're not joking. When you sit down to figure out what is a comprehensive, nutritionally sound food for dogs, you have to sit and look at the percentages of how much you need of bone meal and protein and carbs and what kind of carbs and like everything. Like you have to sit there and calculate it all. So it can be really overwhelming for sure. I'm always like, why don't we spend that time on ourselves first too?
Right.
And maybe we can combine it or look at other options. But there are, we've talked about this before, maybe we'll just talk about it now. The Avco rating of dog foods. Tell us about that. There's only 5 companies that meet these guidelines. So they're not recommended necessarily. They're not certified under Avco. Avco sets certain guidelines, and based on those guidelines, there's only 5 companies that meet those as far as dog food. Tell us about that.
Well, and you know, I think so Avco is really the only kind of oversight body for dog food and cat food and pet food in general. And even companies that have an Avco label, really the main thing that Avco is checking is they're checking the percentages of protein and carbs and fat. It's not a quality control thing. So there truly is no quality control oversight for dog food. It's super scary. So when people come and talk to me and they say, hey, I want to feed this food from, you know, Joe's dog bakery down the street, I say, you know, I'm not telling you that it's a bad food. I just don't know. And that's the scary part for me, is the unknown. And so, you know, veterinarians will often recommend diets such as science diet. It's not because we get kickbacks. I wish I got kickbacks. I don't. But it's because this is a company that's been around. It's done the research. It has published research of how they do it, what they do, that it provides what dogs need. And we know that when we make a recommendation that it's backed in science. It's not backed in marketing. It's backed in science. And so that's why most of them will recommend some of these tried and true brands like Science Diet or Royal Canin or some of the Purina line. I can go into detail on that, but they have some. So one of my favorite foods is the Purina Pro Plan, Purina One, but a lot of the rest of the food is pure garbage by Purina. But finding out what works best, and that's important to realize. When I always talk to people about this, some of you have probably heard me talk about this, but realize that a lot of it's marketing. You're, oh my God, you have your dog on byproducts. Well, realize that when they say that, what we consider byproducts as humans are actually the foods that most dogs will eat. If you look at a dog in the wild, the thigh meat is an afterthought for them. They're going to go to an animal. They're going to go for the underbelly. They're going to go for the easy access, highly nutrient dense, rich organ meat. So liver, kidneys, all the stuff on the inside. They're going to circle back around to the other stuff, but that's what they're going to go for. So that's why they use it in dog food. To us, it sounds gross because that's not something we eat. It's a byproduct for us. It's not a byproduct for the dogs. So, a lot of this is marketing, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So, we'll recommend tried, true companies. It doesn't mean the other ones can't be good, and you just have to make sure that you feel comfortable with what you're doing, that it works for your dog, and that there's no major issues out there. But the other thing, speaking of major issues, I have people that come in and say, well, I don't want to use Science Diet because they've had recalls. And what I tell them is they haven't had any more than anyone else, but I would recommend using a company that has recalls versus one that doesn't. Because what that means is that they're monitoring those things versus the ones that are not monitoring and don't catch those things. So there's lots of companies out there that have probably had issues with their dog food that haven't had recalls because they don't monitor. So like I said, it's all the way you look at it. So just got to be careful out there and realize there's not a right answer, but
it's hard not to go into those fancy bakeries and look at this beautifully packaged dog food with top of the notch marketing and pictures and kangaroo and venison and sweet potato and pea. It looks beautiful. You feel good about buying it for your dog because for humans that's healthy. But like you said, there's no governing guidelines for dog food, so anybody can make it and sell it.
Right.
Means they don't have to have a veterinarian or nutritionalist double check the data, the facts, the nutritional values on the food to even make sure that it's a complete diet for your dog. Like that doesn't, the Avco dogs, the 5 dog foods, some of the guidelines for Avco is it's been a veterinary nutritionalist that has comprised the ingredients, making sure it's balanced. The other one is they do trials on dogs before it was ever put on the market. And you might be like, oh my gosh, well, dogs shouldn't be used in trials. Well, then your dog is. Like if they didn't do a trial, all of you feeding your dog that dog food, now your dog has now become part of that trial. I don't know how I feel about that, right? And what were some of the other ones? So it was the nutritionalist, they do trials. Gosh.
Yeah, there's a couple of those. Those are the main ones.
Okay, I can't remember. Anyway.
And I will tell people, so on the trial thing, so one of the things, like I said, Science Diet is a company that a lot of veterinarians use. One of the things that Science Diet does is that they offer for veterinarians to be able to come out to their factory and their research facilities and see how they operate, how they put things together. So they open it up to us to where we can kind of see what's going on so we can feel comfortable doing it. So I've actually been to their research facility in Topeka, Kansas, and it is amazing. Like if I come back as a pet, if I didn't come back as a 4E Doodle, I'd probably want to come back as one of the animals in this research facility. They get these animals that were abandoned in the shelter that are probably going to be put down, and they take them here. And these, like the cats alone, the cats have more room than most animals do. They have, things to play on. They have, I mean, the enrichment there is unbelievable. I mean, it's just amazing. It's like a wonderland for pets. And the only thing that they have to do on the research thing is that they wear a special collar. So their collar, which is just like a regular collar to us, has a microchip in it. And so it'll only open up one door where the food is, and that's the food that they want them to eat. So there's multiple doors in the room, and that each cat has a collar that'll only open up one door. So that's how they know they're eating that food. That's the only thing they have to do. They don't have them in small cages. They don't, they're not treating them poorly. They have these huge runs. They have couches. They have all this stuff. And like I said, then they monitor them. They check them. They check their weights. They check all the, blood work and stuff. But they live the life of luxury otherwise. And it's not a bad way to do things. So,
and these are pets, cats and dogs that would have been euthanized. I think that is so important that they were given a second chance of life to eat for a living. Sign me up.
Right. That's what they do. They basically lay around and eat. And they have people, they literally pay people just to come in and play with them. I mean, it's a pretty neat deal. So it's not all as bad as it sounds. Like I said, a lot of stuff is marketing and the way that we think
There's
about it.
There's a lot of animal activism propaganda out there that does affect many people doing good things, including responsible, ethical breeders, So no matter what you do, someone is crabby about it. Okay, here's a quick question. We kind of covered this, but this is from a groomer's point of view. She's always unsure about plucking the hair in the ears, as sometimes it causes issues. Is it a must to pluck the ear hair?
I think if you're a groomer, I think it's one of those things where I would communicate it with your client. I mean, that's kind of the way that I always approach stuff, is that, it's a partnership between myself and my client. And I think we need to talk about stuff, I would argue that something that's even more an issue for me is, that, people automatically expressing anal glands, I don't think anal glands should be expressed unless they're an issue, I think once you start expressing them, then you have to keep expressing them, whether that's an old wives' tale or not. It feels the way for me. So I think it's a communication thing, like, hey, I noticed there's a lot of hair in the ears this time. Have you noticed any kind of scratching or itching? And, I feel like when I look at groomers, I don't look at it as an adversarial relationship with them of, oh my gosh, they're doing this and I'm doing that. I think they're an ally. I have plenty of people who come in and say, hey, my groomer saw this on my dog, and, they said I should get checked out. I think that's the most amazing thing that any groomer could do is be an advocate for the pet and say, look, hey, I noticed that there's something going on in the ears here. I think we should pluck these ears, or, would you be interested in plucking the ears? I think it's all a conversation. And so as it's merits, but I think it's just a case by case basis.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And just continuing to unify the relationships of caregivers with your pet is so important. You talked about that at the beginning with your vet. Talk to your vet like a family doctor, give them that information. That should go with your groomer, with your trainer, with your breeder who you bought the dog from. It should be constant and open communication for the betterment and the love of our dogs on so many different levels. Good, thank you. Bernice wants to know, our Doodle is almost 10 months old. It is a 4E Doodle. We feed him 2 cups of Life's Abundance dry dog food a day. There are times when he will eat maybe only 1 cup for the day. Is there a time we need to be worried about him eating? What do we do about these puppies hitting their full-grown weight? This is always a panic because they're used to feeding a ravenous, hungry, growing puppy, and then they start to be, not so much about their food.
Yep. So I had 2 dogs until recently, unfortunately, but both of those dogs, I always tell people, like, I had one dog that he would eat or live to eat. So he would basically, everything he wanted was food. He just wanted food. That's it. Food. If he heard a kernel of food drop in his kennel, he would run up the stairs and jump in and wait for someone to happen. My other dog, he really just didn't care that much. I mean, he'd eat, but I always joke that he would eat to live. Like, if he didn't have to do it, he wouldn't really care that much about it. He wasn't food motivated. There was some days where he would eat all his food. There were some days where he wouldn't eat at all. He'd go on a food strike for a day or so. Generally, if it's not more than a couple of days, I don't worry about it. If they're going up on 3 days, then yeah, it's something worth bringing up. But if they're acting fine otherwise and they skip a meal or they eat a little bit less, I don't stress too much about it unless it's a reoccurring theme, and then or there's some other symptoms developing, and then I recommend working it up.
Good, yeah. And what I ask clients too, because I get this question a lot, and it tends to be when they are hitting their more of an adult weight, like they're full grown now. and they moderate their caloric intake better than most humans do. And as long as everything, if they're still have great activity and normal and happy and healthy and there's no change and their body weight looks good, not to worry. But again, if there's any symptoms along with that, lethargy, different or bloody or diarrhea or vomiting, anything else, then that could be very indicative of something wrong. Okay, good. All right. A question we'll wrap back around. What does expressing anal glands mean? Oh, great. Let's talk about this at 9 in the morning, shall we? Thank you, Wynn. And is it recommended to get done by the groomers? We just kind of covered that. What does it mean?
So I guess first of all, an anatomy lesson. So dogs have basically two sacs that are just underneath the skin, right to the. If you imagine a very gross clock and look at the backside of your dog, if the anus is a clock, at 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock on the clock, there sit two little sacs that have a tube that connects them. The tube opens up right inside the opening there, that secrete a very, very foul-smelling liquid. Okay, it's extremely distinct smell. Once you smell it once, you'll never forget it. But it's a scent gland, so it's very similar to the gland that skunks spray with. But it's a scent gland. Its purpose is so that every time that they go to the bathroom, when they defecate, a little bit comes out and it marks the stool, so it's a scent marker. When they go to the dog park and another dog comes up and sniffs their behind, that's what they're smelling, is that gland. So normal function, they go to the bathroom, a little bit expresses out, it empties it out a little bit as they go. So some dogs, and we don't know why we've seen an increase in this in the past decades. Some dogs have a difficulty expressing that gland, and if it fills up too much, it can get uncomfortable. So that's where we see the dog scooting on their behind on the ground, or licking back there a lot, or paying attention to it. It can get uncomfortable. So it can actually pass past discomfort and go to more of a medical issue, to where if they build it up, it gets too big, it can actually get infected and abscess and rupture, and a whole nother matter there. But so for dogs that are uncomfortable with it, that are scooting, giving attention, then we will recommend expressing it. So basically, expressing is a nice way of us saying that we're going to squeeze all the gross juice out of it. There's two ways to do that. One is what most groomers will do, which is they kind of squeeze it from the outside. In a doodle, when it's pretty full, it's the size of a large grape, okay? And basically they're just squeezing that from the outside over the skin and getting that juice out of there and getting it to come out, okay? What veterinarians will do a lot of times is we will actually insert a finger. It's not the most glorious part of the job, but insert a glove finger and express it from the inside. So we're basically grabbing a hold of it and squeezing it and squeezing all the stuff out of it. If you have a groomer that's been doing it for a long time and knows what they're doing, they can probably empty it completely. It's hard for even me to empty it completely from the outside. I feel like we get a better emptying from it on the inside, but it's just getting all that stuff out of there and allowing that to be cleaned out. So yeah, it's a gross function of the body, but it is a function that's necessary. So that's when we say expressing that gland, is we're basically just squeezing the gland and getting the stuff to come out, so that it empties it out.
Oh boy. Well, thank you so much for sharing about
breakfast time now.
As standard protocol, we suggest drop them off at the groomer. And I always say, don't cut the eyelashes. This is for my doodles. Don't doodle my poodle. Don't poodle my doodle. And don't touch the anal glands. I don't want them touched. I'm on the same, maybe it's old school, I don't know, but there's no reason to have them expressed unless they're showing an issue. And I've also heard horror stories of, no disrespect to groomers, but it happening, the groomers expressing the anal glands, and it actually caused an infection and caused issues severely.
Yeah, you just have to be careful with them. I mean, it's like I said, the body is an amazing thing. Nature is an amazing thing, and it has a function and a way things are supposed to work. And I truly believe that the less that we inhibit that or hinder that, the better. Sometimes we need to intervene, but when we start thinking we're better than nature at doing stuff, we're going to get into some trouble.
Yeah, good. Okay, one more question. Heather and Matt checking in from Kentucky.
Hey, guys.
Left us, I know. The dogs are on Bravado and Sentinel. Anything else we should have them on? P.S. Thanks for taking such care of our Doodles for 6 years. We'll miss you. It's always tough to lose a family.
Yeah. So that's the main stuff that you need to be on. So and there's so many products out there. It's kind of like the dog food industry. There's so many products out there as far as flea and tick control, and some people use this one versus that one. But basically, you need something that's going to cover in most parts of the country. You're going to need something that covers fleas and ticks, which would be like the Bravecto that we have you on. And then the Sentinel is going to cover heartworms. It also covers intestinal parasites like roundworms, hookworms, that kind of stuff. So that would be the main stuff. That's really what I would recommend is something that covers those things which you're already on.
Okay, good. Thank you. Actually, one more question. I think this one's so important too, and so much confusion about this. So tell us your stance on how much walking, running, we've talked about this, can a puppy have before their growth plates close? When do growth plates close? So I know it depends on the size of the dog, but give us your take on improper exercise.
So I would say as much unrestricted activity that they want to have, they can have. They're a puppy, let them run, let them play. I would not ever restrict a puppy from playing. I do recommend caution with forced activities. So forced exercise would be basically tying your dog to your bike and making them run behind you for 5 miles. So that I recommend caution with. Now, if they're going up and down, they're doing the obstacles or that kind of stuff, like that's not forced activity. They'll tell you when they don't want to do it. But if you take your dog out running and don't give it a choice, and it has to run, it can be hard on their joints. Okay. Especially running on pavement like that for a long period of time can be hard on their joints and their growth plates. So, but if they're tearing it up in the yard or running around the dog park, whatever they're doing, that's fine. I mean, let them be puppies. I mean, that's actually a beneficial thing to burn that energy. But we just don't want to force them to run, and especially on hard surfaces for a long period of time. Their growth plates generally close. They start closing in the 7-month range, but they're generally closed by, depending on the breed, 10 to 12 months. So yeah, like I said, as they start to approach a year.
And there's been a lot of documentation of hip dysplasia. So there is genetic components to hip dysplasia. There's breeds that are predisposed to hip dysplasia. There's also a huge environmental influence on hip dysplasia, and that is improper diet. Your dog's too heavy, putting too much weight on those joints, and improper exercise. That consistent, repetitive running for a long distance, biking for a long distance, forced, repetitious exercise that the dog can't stop, manage, turn, lay down, run, spin. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, hip dysplasia is a huge concern in our golden retrievers, and it's something that we do take. You can attest to this. You do all my hip x-rays, right? You do our OFA prelims, some official certifications. We're very much on the same ideology of, if we look at those hips at a year, even OFA states 94.7% of what we have at 1 year is what they're going to have at 2 years. We can eliminate the concern that it's genetically passed, although it can skip generations. But all that aside, there's a huge environmental factor of hip dysplasia. So we have to take care of those little tender hips as well. Puppies' bones are soft and they're not all connected yet. I've seen x-rays. It's kind of fascinating how they're not all connected. And pavement, running on hard, repetitious exercise. Anything else about hip dysplasia?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to point out. So when we say dysplasia, dysplasia just basically means it's an abnormal formation of it. So that would be something that usually they're prone to doing it from puppies. Okay, so things are not forming the way that they should, which is different than arthritis that some of them will get later on regardless. Okay, so we tend to focus more on the dysplasia as being, these are dogs with hip dysplasia are going to they're going to have arthritis at a year or two of age. Okay. Then we have some dogs that are going to have natural arthritis in the hips as they get older. Depending on your terminology, you can call it dysplasia, but it's one of those things where, if we can set them up right when they're younger, like what you're saying, then older on, we're dealing with the normal wear and tear on the body. We're trying to minimize that, but it's definitely early on is where they form those joints and the growth plates, and we want to make sure those are all done correctly.
Okay. Very much like humans, the labor-intensive jobs, hard on your back, hard on your joints. You're going to pay for that later in life. And so protecting these sensitive joints and ensuring that we're letting them form correctly as much as possible is a very valid concern for dog owners and breeders for sure. All right, Dr. McDermott, thank you. We have a ton more questions, but I know you and I have shit to do. So unfortunately, we have a job. Have to do.
If they, like I said, if we'll have to reschedule another time where we can answer more questions, because I love doing that. Love being able to help. Sometimes I talk too much, but I love being able to spread that information for clients. So.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much again for joining us and taking an hour out of your time. Everybody remember, please be kind to your veterinarians. Remember, they are on call all the time. So there's an emergency. Maybe it's your dog that got hit by a car, or your dog that's choking. You would absolutely want the staff to stop and help save your dog. But that requires then the patience and understanding of everybody waiting for their 10 o'clock appointment to get vaccines. So please remember that their schedules are being yanked all over the place, trying to help you, trying to help our dogs. Be kind to our veterinarians, please. Thank you, Doc, for everything that you do for 4E Kennels, our moms, our puppies, our clients. We love you. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you, yes. Bye.